Hello folks, today I'm going to discuss shortly about a difference that I've seen people don't seem to understand very well. A difference that relates mostly to fetishes versus fantasy. Many people consider this as being one and the same. However, English language is, like most other languages, a construct language that is used by people in order to communicate. However, one thing that kind of, let's say, not irritates but annoys me a bit is that people have created concepts like speech, right? And they use it to at least try to make themselves understood, like in my case, and they have created synonymous expressions, but unfortunately have forgotten most of their actual usage. They kind of have forgotten how each actually has to be used. Now, English language has a lot of synonymous expressions. It might not be among the richest in synonyms among the languages of the world. However, the point is very simple. The English language has a lot of synonymous expressions, and they are synonymous but they don't mean the same exact thing. Now, to most people, unfortunately, a fantasy and a fetish is most likely going to end up as the same thing. Now, the way I see a fantasy is something that usually does not hurt you, even if it is something darker or light. A fantasy is something that you would wish fulfilled, but you wouldn't necessarily do much towards it. It's not that you don't want it, but it's something that you imagine, probably a life dream, or you might have some paraphilia, for example, eutassassinophilia, which usually this last paraphilia includes an idea of imagining yourself in all kinds of, let's say, dangerous situations in which a person will kill you. And actually, they also are coupled with sexuality, because that's what eutassassinophilia is about. And I kind of had for a very, very long time very minor forms of the such. However, I keep them, I preserve the such within me because I will use it for my projects that regard psychology and psychiatry. Although I do not specifically activate in the field, I do have some knowledge from many, many people. To move forward, a fetish is something that is more like parasitic. Spiritually speaking, a fantasy is something that you would wish fulfilled. It's something usually good. Um, it's something that also depends on a person's life purpose, and also it depends on um, what you put out. It depends. For example, a narcissist can have a fantasy that everyone actually suffers. It's again something that they imagine based on their own perception of the life they live and of the people they are surrounded with. While, for example, an empath will most likely fantasize about world peace and many other things, like being surrounded by helpful, like minded friends, for example. Which kind of unfortunately happens to not be very often the case. A fetish, however, is something that is purely parasitic. When opening up, people will sooner or later form subconscious parasitic bonds, especially through mentalities of lack, hatred, disgust, and the such, that make bigger or smaller holes in our auric fields, which will act as an invitation for different parasitic entities. And these will come. Most people will call them demons, although I refrain from using this word. In ancient Greek, demon and angelus, daemon and angelus, actually were synonyms and meant the same thing. They meant messenger. They both would deliver a message. Now, there are far worse things than demons, although people most likely will fathom the idea of demons. However, a fetish is something that causes dependency and is a result of one dependency and of an entity ruling you. So if you have sexual fetishes, it's most likely something that you fantasize so much about that you have made your mind continuously think about that and not be able to break your mind from that, to redirect your thoughts from that. And that is usually the case with people who have low self-esteem because they invite within their auric fields and within themselves entities that also don't love themselves. And they want to experience life. So, in order to experience life, they need to find compatible people. And there are unfortunately millions of such compatible people because when you drink, when you lower your awareness, you open yourself up to those. When you get drunk, you become very susceptible to parasitic bindings. Such parasitic bindings can happen even in your dreams when you have vivid dreams of entities visiting you and you don't remember what happened, but basically you had such an attachment formed. Like, how does this work? Like, have you ever had that example, for example, in which there was this girl, let's say, as a guy, and this girl, you didn't like her, like, you didn't find her physically appealing, but there was something like overnaturally attractive about her. And your mind would always find all sorts of things that supposedly you would like, because the purpose of your mind, more or less, is to actually prevent you from becoming a greater version of yourself. Especially when your mind gets, fed with all the possible parasitic entities that you invite in your life through everything that you consume. Not necessarily through food, but also through everything that you consume. For example, the internet, your mobile phone, the movies you watch, the music you hear, and anything that you actually encounter, including the environment that you live in. If these things are against you, then also expect a lot of parasitic entities to pull you down. And you can feel that if you feel a lot of hatred and feelings that do not belong to you, if you feel a lot of doubt, confusion, if you feel a lot of self-hatred, a lack of love and empathy, these are signs that such entities are within you, or if not recently, well, very recently they will. And if you do that, imagine that you are a bright star in the depths of space. You will be easily found by such entities. They may not get inside you like from the first try, however, they will slowly and surely get in. And every time you feel a temptation, it's basically one of those or more of those entities trying to make you do different things. Like, if you can imagine people who suddenly start doing stuff that no longer serves them, like selling their house and quitting their job, and although they don't have any means of sustaining themselves, they just do that out of a sudden, and they also suffer afterwards because in the first place, they didn't want to do that. That's a case of parasitic entities coming in. They may not necessarily trigger, like sexuality or fetishes, but they can also trigger a lot of other things. And in the case of fetishes, because this was the case of the video, they are a result of such entities. And we may know already that there are so many tempting fetishes out there. I mean, yes, especially that fetishes are correlated with the sexual part. Sexual energy is a person's life energy. When you masturbate and release, you lose that much life energy. It's not necessarily that you will die sooner, however, life energy is also creative energy. So you're giving all that energy out of you, most likely to some entities who can hardly wait to gorge on that ichor, that blood of the gods. It is one of the most refined energies, and unfortunately, people nowadays, including me, have this tendency to not manage their energy well. And apart from actually getting a lot of negativity, they also masturbate. And when you release that awesome positive energy within you, the problem is that you leave a hole within you. You leave an area of emptiness, and that can easily be filled by any other type of energy, usually negative energy that you have around, and that is why you will feel depression. That is why you will feel constantly tired. Now, fetishes are most typical to the sadomasochistic couples. Now, the mechanic of these is that the two will most likely, and I mean always, they will be dependent on the state that they are inflicted, that they are induced. For example, a masochist will derive pleasure from pain, so they are instantly drawn by any other person who will inflict them pain. They're not attached to the person, they are attached to that idea of pleasure. And similarly, the sadist will be attached to the pleasure they derive from dealing pain to others, because they each drew demons and parasitic entities that actually thrive on that. Those people actually don't exist. They induce pain to themselves because of two reasons. First of all, they know that they get attached to that feeling of pleasure in a way which the brain is very dependent upon, and when those demons get so uh, like they gorge so much on that pain, and they end up being almost full, the person is finally free for a period of time, and they will actually get to do this again and again and again just to feel free from that parasitic group's influence. When they get full of energy, they will have a period of time when they will simply leave their host alone. Why do parasitic entities exist? Well, it is said that these entities are separated from creation, so therefore they will simply have to latch on to other entities that can gain energy. It is said that demons may not be sleeping, but the point is that they dissipate just like everything else. However, they simply seem, are told to not be able to replenish their energy, so they require hosts to do that. In many cases, parasitic entities can be a good thing because they might be actually territorial, and they can actually help you, although it will cost energy. They can actually help you to, keep other such parasitic entities at bay. Now, demons are a type of parasite that in many cases you can actually learn from them. Every time you have a fetish, every time you have parasitic entities, you can actually go deep within you and try to talk to them and see what's the point, what's the problem, what's holding them into you. And if you don't get an answer from them or you don't find them, you can always speak to your inner voice. It's harder than it seems, but you have to be very quiet and you have to be very patient, because we are taught to disregard our inner voices. So, at many times, it will actually test us to see if we have the patience to wait for it after having inhibited it for so long. And it will tell you whatever you need. And once you solve the problem, those entities can no longer live within you. For example, if you have entities who hate love and hate themselves, you will also hate themselves because that's the only reason. You'll also hate yourself because that's the only reason they are actually in you. And if you start loving yourself, they will actually leave. They will fight, they will try to keep you hateful towards yourself, but if you start truly loving yourself and surrounding yourself with much more positive people and making sure that your environment is actually supporting you and not pulling you down, well, you will end up with those entities leaving you. So the point of fetishes is that people get attached to the idea of pleasure. Whatever the fetish they have, they are drawn by that idea of pleasure, and they simply feed their demons. One of my quotes in life is, people have demons to feed. So that is why I can never fear humans. However, I will feel somewhat unsafe around many people, because people can easily become slaves, and it matters to find out what type of parasitic entities they are slaves towards, because even criminal minds become so because of parasitic entities that take hold of those people, and things get very, very dark afterwards. Depending on the entity controlling you, they can actually get some more and more control. That is why many people fail more and more towards dependencies like smoking and drinking, because those entities actually require you to preserve yourself in that respective state. That is why it is called a dependency. You have to do a vicious cycle, you have to repeat that, so that you stay at a certain vibration for those entities to remain within you. So if you find yourself in this situation, comment below Don't forget to like and subscribe. I will try to post as many videos as possible, at least twice or three times, probably more per week. Feel free to put your questions in the comment, and I'm going to answer them through another video or probably through a comment. And hope to see you some other time. Hope to hear from you soon. Have a very have a nice set of holidays, as well as have a happy new year.